me, your host, Sean Lynn, in the pub for a Dram with friends, where we talk about faith, family, food, and fun. Pull up a chair and I'll pour you a drink. Episode 7. We are blessed to have Bishop McGrattan in the pub. So sit back as we share a Scotch with our shepherd. Welcome to a special episode of A Dram with Friends. Today we are blessed to have the Bishop of Calgary, Bishop McGrattan, joining us live in the pub. So that we will open a special bottle. Welcome, Bishop.
Thanks very much, Sean. This is quite a ministry you've started during COVID.
Well, it's we got to reach the men somehow.
I see.
So and a dram is not a lot of whiskey, but I don't know if I'll ever get as little as 1/8 of an ounce in a glass. But welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and we talk about faith, family, food, and fun. So any of those topics, you're welcome to jump in. But
Okay.
we like to know, who is Bishop McGrattan?
Okay. Well, just turned 64 about a week ago. So, but I come from a small family. I have one sister, and both parents now obviously are passed away. But I have very good memories of growing up in the context of a family. My parents, obviously both Catholic, and as a result of that, there was that natural support and that encouragement, not overt, but we went to Mass on Sundays. And I think Sunday was, for me, growing up, was the way that my family and my parents wanted us to celebrate. So it always was in the context of celebrating Mass. And then as I got older, we came home and we would have breakfast together, and it became the opportunity for my dad and myself to start, discussing things. And as a teenager, you like to challenge your father. You like to sort of pose these questions and ideas. And so it became, for me, a way to sort of understand, him and his work. And as well, he kind of began to share his faith, but it was through, the world and politics. We love to discuss politics. And I always remember my mom, she'd always be having to kick us off the kitchen table at about 1 or 2 o'clock so she could get ready for dinner. And dinner was always roast beef. It was or chicken, and it always had to last another 2 days. So we had it as either, beef sandwiches with gravy or turkey or chicken. But we all knew we had to sort of make that meal on Sunday last for Monday and Tuesday. Maybe we would get it for sandwiches, at lunch going to school. So that's kind of, the food. And it was really around Sunday because my father traveled. He first began as a salesman, pharmaceutical. So he was away traveling. And so weekends were where he really paid a lot of attention to family activities. He knew he was away during the week, but Friday, Saturday, and Sunday when he was home, that became the time for the family to be connected. So, yeah.
What's interesting, you bring that up, and as a police officer, I was looking at different crime prevention models, and even in the U.S., the Drug Administration, the number one prevention for drugs is family dinners. And if you have a family meal 5 times a week, you reduce the chance of your kids getting hooked on drugs an exponential amount. I don't have the figures at the top of my head, but you touch on something that's so important for men to understand.
Yeah.
That being at the family table and present, not with your phones and your computers, and so that's something that men can do that's very easy.
It's true. And another thing that I noticed about family and food was that my dad did like to cook and barbecue, but he also, I realized when I was growing up, he entrusted a lot of things like practical household responsibilities. And, I realized now that he gave me responsibility at a very young age and didn't necessarily criticize. Like, if he didn't like me cutting the grass the way it was, he might say it later. But he always taught me how to do things, taught me some carpentry, basic carpentry. My summer work was because of him. He got me to paint the house when I was in grade 8, showed me one Saturday how to paint and not get paint on the bricks and everything else, and so let me go for 3 or 4 weeks. And as a result of that, lo and behold, in the community, people started to come up and said, "Is your son painting houses next summer?" And so I started to get these regular jobs, and I'm very grateful when I think back that he had a real sense of entrusting, and I think that's what fathers can do as well, because sometimes we understand parents can be somewhat overprotective, and there's good reason to be, as you point out, but this regular sense of being accountable, entrusting young people with responsibility, I think it gives them a path that they begin to understand, that they have many gifts and that they become an adult through that responsibility.
And that's very interesting. As you know, we've done barbecue outreach for a number of years here in the parishes and the diocese, and quite often I've had young men who have to work off community hours come
Okay.
join me, and just the excitement they get of being part of something and given responsibility is quite interesting, and I think that is one of the issues that we have today is kids aren't given that opportunity. I remember one speaker talking about the image of God the Father and allowing us to do our part, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like you having your kid help you wash the car. It's not like you need the kid to help you wash the car. You're probably going to do it faster without them,
True.
but it's them being there and feeling like they're part of something.
Yeah.
And kids, young people, young men especially, need to feel like they belong to something. And that's where the attraction in the gangs gives them, is that belonging.
Yeah.
And we have to create opportunities for them to belong here with the faithful. So
Yeah. The other thing that I remember growing up was like the family was extended to the neighborhood. And as you pointed out, I mean, we started to come together, but it was usually around sports or other activities. So, look, road hockey was basically, okay, we're going to gather at 2 o'clock, or we go down to the school and play pickup football. And really, it also taught you skills of negotiation, not, yeah, good, healthy competition, but at the same time, you had a good sense of tiredness after you had this game together, a pickup, and you would banter back and forth either before or after. So it also, when I think back, it's those experiences of an extended family, as you say, where young men get together and they experience something that's common, and whether it be sports or hunting or something like that, and why it's important. And in our culture now, it's, as you say, the individual video games. But I've heard during COVID, board games have become a new kind of attraction, like playing Scrabble or doing a puzzle together. And that, in and of itself, is a wonderful way to interact as family and community. And also, yeah.
yeah, board games have actually been on the rise for a few years. Because one of my team members, he'd run a board game
Oh, yeah.
weekend, and and he had the St. Peter's Youth Group. This was many years ago, doing the catering for the lunch, and the kids jumped in there, and they thought it was the best day ever, because
Yeah.
they sat down and played some board games, and that's the thing that we need to do, is find avenues to engage our young people and our families. And I know our family, Michelle and I have taken up frisbee golf or disc golf here in the last couple of years, and it's a fun way to get out, get a little exercise, and go for a walk and have some fun.
Yeah.
So there's lots of different things that families can do. And that's where it's got to be hard for you as the shepherd when we're dealing with what's going on in the world right now and having to close the churches, and I know a lot of people are hurting, and it's a no-win situation basically.
Yeah.
You're not doing enough, you're doing too much, you're not letting us do. So how can we encourage the faithful, and especially the men, because that's who I'm trying to encourage, to continue that mission as evangelizing people and engaging them where they're at?
So that's a good question, because when the pandemic first came upon us and we didn't have mass, there were the masses that were live streamed, and we received at the pastoral center pictures of families where they would send it in and show us how they arranged their family room or their living room or kitchen to prepare for the mass. Then talking to some parents afterwards, they realized with young kids that was kind of difficult for them to sort of sit through that. But that challenged them to sort of begin to use the liturgy of the word. So they would hear the scripture, or they would then read it from the missalette and then begin to engage the young people, their children, and then maybe through that offer prayers. We can't receive the Eucharist, but this is how they extended. What I think is important is the aspect of our faith through, yes, the liturgy of the word, the scriptures, but we also know that because of the Eucharist not being able to be celebrated publicly there at the beginning, that became an important focus. Since then, obviously, yes, I've seen young families back, and it's good to see them in certain parts of the church. They're forming their own little cohort. And the kids, I think, too, at the cathedral, every week I have some of the young servers come up. When are we going to be able to serve? And it's hard for me to sort of say, we need to still keep with these restrictions. And I hope that some of the servers aren't going to forget how to serve after 4 or 5 or 6 months. But I do think, we need to recognize that the celebration of the Eucharist is something that is essential. And I think with absence or being deprived of that, I hope it has awakened a real spiritual hunger. It's a difficult way to experience it. It's not something that I would impose, but it's something that's happened. And as a result of that, I have had these positive encounters where people have said, I really miss the Eucharist. And when I hear that, what I'm hearing is this deep love and deep faith in the presence of Christ that we receive in the Eucharist. I installed a pastor last evening in St. James and Okotoks, and they were socially distanced, large church. There was probably about 200. But it was good to see the parishioners and the family come for that Mass where we installed the new pastor, Father Vincent. And I can see, the deep gift of our Catholic faith that is so centered on the Eucharist, and why it is so difficult that we have these restrictions. And it's my hope and prayer that those who have this deep faith will become missionaries to invite those who might not have that same level of faith and say, look, I've experienced my faith in a new way and my belief in the Eucharist, and we need to go back to the table of the Lord. And I really think that there's going to be these opportunities for just one-on-one neighborhood conversations with fellow Catholics and saying, yes, you've been away, but you need to come back. And I think that's what I hope some of you who have this deep love and yearning for the Eucharist will then translate that in being invitational to those who might be, well, I've become comfortable. This has been nice. I get to watch it on television, but it's not the same.
It's not the same.
It's not. And so I'm hoping that deep love and faith will be expressed in inviting others back.
Well, and that's where I think at this time we're recording it on the Feast of St. Jerome, and we have to count our blessings, as it were, because San Francisco, you look at other jurisdictions where they're not getting any help from the government. And if you need me to go talk to Jason Kenny in a nice, firm way, you just say the word, and I got your back. So,
Yeah. Well, I want to say that I think that those in government have been listening to the Alberta bishops. I think we were instrumental in providing them with reflections on how guidelines could be implemented for gatherings. And at the same time, I would like to see the restrictions lifted and have more people. I think what we're seeing across Canada is maybe a second wave, so the prudence of keeping these restrictions in place, I hope will be a way in which we can return to more of a percentage of that capacity sooner rather than later. So
well, and there are good signs with the schools opening.
Yep.
Like I'm working in a school, and you've got 1,500 young people in a high school that I'm at, and they've had one case so far.
Right.
So those are the signs. I know they're opening up the athletics.
right,
They're looking at expanding the numbers, I believe, so that they can participate maybe in a game by the end of their camp or whatever. So they're looking at engaging people, and I pray and will keep praying that we will return to having our full parish life, because I know so many people that are missing. Like I'm running a men's breakfast, or attempting to reinstate it, and a lot of the faithful are zoomed out because they're on the computer all
Yeah.
day, and then
yeah,
they're not as keen on doing it at 6 a.m. in the morning.
no, and I can see that
Yeah.
there is a growing kind of lethargy or fatigue about Zoom. Interesting, and I'm just going to share this, having talked to the superintendent of our Catholic schools. Our schools are bringing back the extracurricular sooner than the public system. There's a sense of confidence. The other interesting thing that I learned was there's a higher percentage of the Catholic students who wanted to come back and be physically present in the school and form a community. The public system had more of an increased request for online learning. So I kind of sense that there's an innate understanding that even in the Catholic school, this coming together and physically being present and experiencing the community of the school and the faith is something that the kids and their parents wanted. So even in that kind of anecdotal kind of understanding of what the difference might be, that's a desire for us to be physically present to one another, to form the body of Christ, and to celebrate the Eucharist in that way too. So, yeah, it's interesting.
So I've introduced a segment in my, whatever these are, webcast shows, whatever. A lot of our young men are struggling in life, and so the question is, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
That's a good question. I guess I would say is that whether somebody at 18 realizes that there's a deep presence within each of us, we talk about it as the presence of the Holy Spirit of God. We have what I would call our conscience. And oftentimes young people are afraid to listen to that small, still voice. They listen to their peers, they listen to others, and sometimes what is lost is this confidence that God really is present and is speaking to us. And I guess if I would say it, I didn't necessarily understand that, and until you have to make decisions to go against what you know maybe is voices and pressures, and I would say an influence that maybe sometimes is not going to result in good choices. And so I guess what I would say is to have the courage and the confidence is to listen to that voice, that presence of God in one's conscience. Did I know it at 18 as conscience? No. Did I experience it? Yes. And really to sort of have the understanding that that voice really is inviting us to choose a path towards goodness, towards truth, and really wants to make sure that we understand happiness.
I don't know if you know the Gaelic source of whiskey, the term,
No.
Ishkabaha, which means water of life. And I just finished this morning actually reading finishing off Revelation, and one of the last paragraphs is, "And let him who is thirsty come, let him who desires take the water of life without price." So I think that's where we're trying to lead them in, and this is a little more expensive. And
I hope it was a gift, Sean.
it actually was a gift.
Okay.
Interesting story was I gave somebody the Consecration to St. Joseph book, and he gave me that.
Oh, there you go. That's a fair trade.
I was struggling with that but the Lord works in mysterious ways.
He does. He does.
Thank you for joining us, and I pray that we can do this again someday.
Thank you, Sean. And thank you for your evangelization of the men and witnessing to your faith. I think that takes courage, and I hope that the men that are watching are enjoying this and really through these conversations being awakened to their faith and their responsibility as men. So cheers to you.
Cheers. I pray you have enjoyed this episode of A Dram with Friends. Please send us your questions or suggestions to adram@godsquad.ca or support us at godsquad.ca with a donation. Thank you.